Again. Hello and welcome to IPI Current Affairs Talk. The 79th session of United Nations General Assembly is currently taking place at UN headquarters in New York. In light of this significant gathering of world leaders, Islamabad Policy Institute has decided to deliberate on a few key questions. The theme of the 79th session is Leaving No One Behind, Acting Together for Sustainable Peace, Development, and Human Dignity for Present and Future Generations. Today, IPI is honored to have Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry, who brings experience of first-hand knowledge of multilateral forums. He is the chairman of the Slober Institute and former foreign secretary. Ambassador Chaudhry will speak and discuss important aspects of United Nations issues and their relevance to Pakistan. Thank you, sir, for sparing your valuable time for us.
All right. Thank you, Huma, for inviting me to this forum of IPI for discussion on, I understand, the current session of the UN General Assembly, which has started, as you know, from 10th of this month already. This is the only time when the heads of government and states gather in such large numbers in one place. And they exchange views on multiple issues of peace, security, and development. As I understand, the session this time has three main features, or perhaps four. One is, of course, the general debate. In general debate, every member state is given 15 minutes to pronounce the, his or her country's overall policies, so that the rest of the world knows what is the formal position of every country on the issues that are important to that country. And second part of this is the Summit of the Future, which is being organized in this session, essentially because there is a sense that multilateralism is failing, that it is not delivering the results that the world wants at this point in time. And you also know that the world today is far more divided than it ever was. There are wars happening, there are major power competitions happening, and we also see most countries being affected by that. So in that sense, this will be a good attempt to revitalize, reinvigorate the multilateral spirit, which was the essential theme of the United Nations. But I understand this future summit, the Summit of the Future, will also talk about global digital compact, because as you know, there's considerable competition in technology. And some people are even talking about technological bifurcation, which means that in parallel, two different systems are running, and that might create a huge issue for the world. And technology is also being weaponized, being used. And just see what happened the day before and yesterday in Lebanon, where pagers and cell phones smartphones were used as weapons to hurt people. And so this will be a good event in which I think most leaders of the world, I hope our Prime Minister too, will be speaking and talking about. Another aspect of the same summit would probably be on the youth, the future generation. How do we make sure that our world, the world that we are bequeathing to our next generation, uh, goes into the hands in which they do understand what is it that they would need to do to make future a better world for all of us. Then I understand there are also some high level meetings, and this is also a tradition in the United Nations system to hold high level meetings. One high level meeting that they are doing is on the risks that rise in sea levels is presenting. Many of the countries, but particularly in the Pacific Ocean, they're hell worried, like countries like Tonga and Samoa and Tuvalu, that they might not exist if sea level continues to rise. So it's a very serious issue, and not only for island states like Maldives and others that I mentioned, but also for coastal states, because much of the humanity lives on the coastal regions, and therefore it is a serious threat. And there's another high level meeting which is happening on antimicrobial resistance. And this also, in my view, is very topical and urgent and important. And reason is that we have just come out of the COVID pandemic, and we know that bacteria and viruses and fungus and all these things can be they are developing a resistance to the medicine that we have developed. So every time they evolve, they morph into a new life, and our medicine becomes redundant. So that also, I think, is a very, very useful session. So my sense is that this year's UN General Assembly session is very, very important for the humanity, and I hope that our country will also take full part in it and also benefit from it.
Now, I would like to start with Pakistan's global role and priorities. How you see that, how does Pakistan plan to contribute to the theme of leaving no one behind? And what are its key priorities and expectations from the UNGA session, particularly in addressing conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine?
Leaving no one behind essentially was the theme of the SDGs, the Agenda 2030 that was adopted in 2015. Um, and the idea was that we all should be educated, we should all have better health facilities, there should be no economic inequalities, and there should be opportunities for every society to grow its economy. Now, these are some of the, there are several sustainable development goals, which was a graduation, as you know, from the Millennium Development Goals. So every country can assess for itself, because they have made various very concrete indicators of achievement, which will tell you where a country stands in terms of SDGs. So the idea of SDGs was that every country should be given an opportunity to develop itself and undertake a human development that will bring it up to the relatively more developed societies. Now, as you know, only very few developing countries have been able to meet those sustainable development goals. And if the average of the world is higher, it is mainly because China's statistics have improved so remarkably that the world average of SDGs achievement has gone up. But to be honest, we need to go a long way in achieving that. We are only 6 years left in achieving these SDGs at the national level. So my own sense is that Pakistan is not there yet. We still need to do a lot more to achieve that. So we will probably, I hope that our Prime Minister will go there with the report that we have had, the achievements that we have had, and also the shortfalls, the gaps, which would need some kind of support from the international community. So that's my sense on this particular theme.
Okay, thank you.
And you also talked about Gaza. Okay, Gaza and
Yeah, Gaza
Ukraine.
and
Of
Ukraine. Yeah.
course, these are two very important issues which have created such a high degree of instability around the world.
Mhm.
First, the war in Europe. Now, the war in Europe has two levels to be assessed. One, that war in Europe is essentially has become a proxy war between the United States and the Western countries on the one hand, and Russia on the other. And in the process, poor Ukrainians have suffered enormously. Millions of Ukrainians have to flee their homes, and their country is getting devastated. Therefore, I think there is an urgent need for the world to suggest to both the US led West and Russia to enter into some kind of peace, to stop the war and find a peaceful solution of their issues, because the wars do not resolve any issues. This is an established fact of history. And therefore, they will have to move into that direction. I believe Pakistan would also provide the same advice and counsel to these countries. On the Gaza front, I believe that the world has seen the untold and unprecedented brutalities by Israeli forces on the helpless, unarmed Palestinians, uh, all in the name of defending Israel. But what defense is it when you had colonized all these people for such a long time? It was an open prison for all these Palestinians, 2.2 million of them. And now you are bombing them. They even take shelter in some building and you bomb that. When they go to hospital, you bomb that. So nothing is left there. And yet, the Western world is extending full support to Israel. So the rest of the world is flabbergasted, is totally
Yeah.
stunned. Why is this such a big double standard of human rights that the Western countries use to lecture us on? And they can't see what's happening there. Can't they see that even their own people have gotten to the streets of New York, Chicago, London, everywhere? And but their governments are not listening. So geopolitics has become really heartless, and it's so sad. And one would only hope that the this session will again put pressure on Israel to stop this war and this barbarity that it has unleashed on the people of Gaza.
By taking line from the sustainable development, what measures will Pakistan take to address climate change and reduce its carbon footprint? And how can the international community support its sustainable development priorities?
Climate change is one area where I must commend that United Nations has made really serious efforts. This whole
Okay.
Conference of Parties process started from the United Nations, and there are very commendable goals and different instruments created to reduce the carbon footprint. That said, I believe that all nations will have to work hard on their own and not rely totally on the international support. And the reason is very simple. Reason is
Mhm.
that for getting any international assistance, you need viable, concrete national and regional projects. Unfortunately, Pakistan has been deficient in preparing such projects. And there's no harm in accepting your weakness, because only then you can fix it. We need to develop in house capacity to develop those projects to get international assistance. But more importantly, you need to rely on your own sources to fix much of the problems that are brought about by climate change. You see, Pakistan is one of the most vulnerable countries of the world as far as climate change is concerned. But you also can see that there is not much we are able to do. 2022 floods, the displaced people are still out there 2 years
Yeah.
down the line. And 2005 is natural disaster, earthquake, the people are still reeling after the effects of that. So that's not how you develop your own in-house capacity. I think we need to do much more in-house than we think that we should do at the outside platform. So that's my take on this issue.
Okay. Quite well said, sir. Another important issue at the UN is global governance and reforms. What are Pakistan's views on reforming the United Nations Security Council, and how can this be achieved? Like, it's a very long intending issue which has been discussed over the years at every session of UNGA. So, how you see Pakistan's position on this issue, how they see it?
You see, there's a long background to it, as you said, and I personally have participated in it for 6 long years when I was there. Uh, and this issue essentially arises out of the fact that the UN Security Council's makeup reflects the reality of 1945 and it must be updated. There are 5 islands of privilege, special states with special veto powers, and you know them, America, United States of America, and Russia, China, UK, and France. And there has been a call to expand the UN Security Council. And there are 4 countries which believe that they should be there, and they are India, Brazil, Germany, and Japan. They call themselves as G4. The problem that other side has is that we don't want to increase the undemocratic nature of UN Security Council. If UN Security Council has to be reformed, then it should be made more democratic, more participatory, more representative than it is. And if you just increase the number of islands, then what you are actually creating is regional hegemons. All these countries which will have a special status will assert hegemonic policies in their own respective regions. And when the matter goes to the United Nations, they will exercise their veto. So the smaller states and the medium-sized states are hell worried that if you are going to only increase the veto power of some more members, then we have nowhere to go. So in that sense, if you just accept the formula of G4, you are making the United Nations more irrelevant and more ineffective. So that's the challenge. Then how do we reform the UN Security? There are several proposals including by what is called Uniting for Consensus, UFC, which is led by mainly Italy, Mexico, Pakistan, South Korea, Argentina, and many other middle powers which believe that they ought to have some kind of representation. Then there is Africa, which is a huge continent of 54 states. They believe that they deserve 2 states there. So it is such a complex problem that the solution to this is not that easy. But we cannot accept and should not accept enlarging the states with veto powers, because that will not be good for global peace and stability.
You are saying that impasse may last for the reforms at the UNSC. Okay,
Looks like that.
sir. Okay. Okay. Then I have a second last question with regard to the summit of the future, sir. Like, what are Pakistan's expectations, or what should be the Pakistan expectations from the summit? And how can it contribute to the Pact for the Future, Declaration of Future Generations, and Global Digital Compact? So, how you see that?
Well, in my humble view,
Yes.
Pakistan uh, should nudge the world to move to the basics, go back to the basics. What are those basics? Basics are the UN Charter principles. The principles in which we said that we will respect the sovereignty of each other countries, we will respect the territorial integrity, We will not interfere in the internal affairs. We will not intervene in other countries. We will not resort to war. We will resolve our issues through peaceful means. Now, these are some of the principles which
Hmm.
have been flouted, which have been violated with impunity. And it all started essentially with US invasion of Iraq in violation of the UN Security Council mandate. And ever since then, Russia occupied Crimea and India launched a strike on unilateral strike on Balakot. So unilateralism rather than multilateralism has come to the fore. So the answer is that you revive multilateralism and start and force and oblige countries to respect each other's sovereignty and not interfere and intervene in each other's affairs. And I think that should be the message which should come out of the summit of the future.
Okay, excellent, sir. You stated it very in a very appropriate manner. And now my last question and very important one related to the new wave of terrorism and extremism. That how will Pakistan address this specific issue of terrorism and extremism at the UNGA session? Because there will be a lot of questions and the sideline discussions would be on terrorism and extremism issue. So how you see that our government or our representative will deal with this at the international forum?
My own sense is that at the UN level, terrorism has not is no longer the top priority.
Oh, okay, got it.
It
Okay,
is the conflicts in Gaza, conflicts in Ukraine, major power competition, and so on.
okay,
And terrorism has, become a second priority area. I don't foresee a lot of discussions there. Of course, Pakistan will project its case that Pakistan is fighting terrorism, mainly coming out of Afghanistan and also India. And we will plead our case and we will also showcase the state terrorism being perpetrated by India in the Indian occupied Kashmir. And I think we will talk all about that. And I'm sure there are some other countries also which will like to talk about it. But for the major powers, mostly the United States, since it has exited from the area, it thinks that it's a regional issue and should be solved through regional mechanisms. Whereas
okay,
Pakistan does not really agree with this view. We believe that today Pakistan's blood is being shed by TTP. Tomorrow it could be other neighbors and even the other regions. And therefore, terrorism still is a major issue, and that needs international cooperation. And that would probably be our message there.
okay. Sir, if you allow, I would have one real last question, which is very important in a sense that while meeting at the international forum with all the big powers as well, how will Pakistan balance its relationships with the US, China, and Russia if we see the pretext of current growing global politics? Rather, it's in the context of Ukraine, like Russia is involved, and every state has different perspective on particularly Gaza and Ukraine. So how you see Pakistan will balance US, China, and Russia relations for the better, like bilateral or multilateral relationships?
Let's
How you
start
see
with
it?
understanding the nature of US China competition. Let's start with understanding that. This
Okay,
is not the kind of Cold War that you saw between the US and Soviet Union.
okay,
There are complex interdependencies now between China and the US. And therefore, you are not expecting the world to get divided into camps. Yes, there'll be pressures on the countries like Pakistan to join the camp of one country or the other, one power or the other. And I think the solution for most countries like Pakistan is that they would like to maintain their relations with both powers based on their own national interests. Now that's what everybody else is doing. Now China has a conflictual relationship with the US, but it is economically engaged with the US. China and India have a conflictual relationship, but both have economic engagement as well. And same goes for India, having relations with Russia, despite the fact that US and Russia are currently at daggers drawn. Now, that's why I believe that every country has a kind of strategic autonomy to maintain its relations with every other state based on its own
Mhm.
national interest. Now, we have Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, I think, in the town today. And
Yeah,
that also clearly shows that Pakistan wants to maintain relations with China, Russia, US, and
Russia.
every other
Yeah.
major power. And that
Okay.
should be, that's the name of the game. Now, the word balance may sometimes be misleading because balance means equality or equity. That's not how it
Okay.
is. You can
Okay.
never have a balance, but you can always maintain relations with both countries. And I can go on and on because I've given lectures on it, but suffices to say that it depends on us. If we define our interests very, very clearly, we should be able to stand on our feet to pursue our interests vis-a-vis US, vis-a-vis China, and also vis-a-vis other parts of the world.